All right.
How many times have we done this? We've done this.
All right, let's do this.
This is gonna make for great content.
All right, welcome to this economics podcast. This is for our high school Bellarmine College Preparatory for macroeconomics AP, taught by the wonderful Mr. Medeiros. I'm your host, Thomas Baker, and today we're talking about this moral issue of child labor with the cobalt mining for things like our smartphones that we use every single day. Today with me, I have two guest experts. I have Alec and Evan. So Evan, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Sukahara. I am an expert.
Hey guys, I'm Alec Yerganian. I'm glad to be sitting with my peers to be talking about an issue such as this. Thomas?
All right. So if we want to just start off, I have a statistic here saying that a smartphone has about 5 to 10 grams of cobalt. A laptop has about 1 ounce. And electric car has about 10 to 20 pounds. And so, Alec, if we want to start it off with you, like, what is this effect and, like, where is all of this cobalt coming from? And what is...
Yeah, all right, definitely. So, as we know, cobalt is specifically found in the batteries of all these, electronical equipment, whether it be a car, laptop, phone. But more statistically speaking, cobalt is usually found in smartphones, where 50% of all smartphones, or all cobalt is used in smartphones, according to Forbes and other big names. And so specifically, this cobalt is mined in these places such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is producing 66%, 2/3 of the world's cobalt. This market is actually expected to grow 30-fold by 2030, according to Darton Commodities Ltd, which is a research company based in London. That's some pretty crazy statistics, Evan. I think you'd agree, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I also saw that statistic on the exponential growth chart of the cobalt trade. So moving further into that statistic you found, I noticed that it almost increased by 600% by the year of 2030, and this is an estimate based on the year of 2016. So the number actually could have risen because it's now 2018.
Yes. Yeah, recently in 2018 it's just boomed.
But besides that, I noticed that the cobalt the cobalt trade in the Democratic Republic of Congo exists because of its location, and it has the cobalt.
Yeah.
But I am wondering, guys, who is mining all this cobalt? Like, where is the cobalt coming from? Because I know as a third world country, the Democratic Republic of Congo doesn't really have the industrialized mining that the United States would have. So who's doing all the mining?
Yeah, all right. So a bit on that. So UNICEF has been, doing a lot of deep diving and digging into this mining, because as we know, a lot of exploitation occurs when everyone wants just a quick buck on something such as cobalt. And places such as the DRC, there's not really many regulations to be controlling all this mining. So UNICEF made a study, or found that an estimated 40,000 children are involved in this labor specifically. And this was a study that they released this year in 2018. And that's quite remarkable, really, because all those children, 100% of those child miners are actually, they hand mine cobalt, and the cobalt, 66% of it is coming from the DRC, and of the 66% of the cobalt coming from the DRC, according to Amnesty, who's also in this big mess because they also look at human rights and labor inequality and inefficiencies, and they've also found that hand mining, which is extremely dangerous and lacks any regulation because it exposes all these people to toxic chemicals and damaging air and the really intensive labor. They found that 20% of all of the mining in the DRC for this cobalt is actually hand mined. And it's quite crazy, really.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Evan.
So the obvious question is that everybody's asking themselves is why do these big companies, why do these large corporations buy from companies such as Umicore, who is a Belgian company that actually buys cobalt from these child-run mines? Why these large corporations don't just buy from different countries?
And Umicore, they go through the Chinese middlemen, correct?
Exactly. Right. But there's cobalt in places like Canada, China, Russia, Australia, and Canada specifically being very close to headquarters of the Apple and Samsung and Microsoft and Tesla, all in the United States and in China where the manufacturing is taking place. But the reason why is because of the child labor market. Because it is so easy and so cheap to get this cobalt. The cobalt mining in the Democratic Republic of Congo is the most economically viable for these companies.
Yeah.
And I believe you have specific statistics on
Yes.
the trade value between each section of the process.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's very easy to see that the demand really, if we're looking at curves here, it's definitely shifting right because of this increase. You know, we're hearing more about Tesla. We're hearing more about Apple, Samsung. We're hearing all about these companies. And, you know, they all their products require batteries. And, you know, batteries need cobalt. And, you know, the more new efficient batteries, lithium ion, they need cobalt. So cobalt is obviously a really profitable trade in that sense where the demand curve is shifting right and there's less and less supply because of this increased demand.
Actually, before we get to the numbers,
Yes.
I'd like to stage out the specific parts of the trade for
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah, go ahead.
who's listening so they know where the money's shifting from. So it starts out in these child mines, the artisanal mines as they call them, inside the Democratic Republic of Congo. They move to intermediates, which Alec will address, and then to mining companies, then to the manufacturers who actually construct the phones with the batteries in them, and then finally inside of your local electronic. So you can now address like the cost.
Yeah. For sure. All right. So CNBC, they cited the Bloomberg's new energy finance statistics, which show that this year the economic impact of buying raw cobalt is $8.8 billion. $8.8 billion. Now, from this, we can derive that 66% or 2/3 of that money is directly from the cobalt mines in the DRC. 50% of all cobalt trade is, you know, cobalt is directly used into smartphones. So then we get $2.904 billion. 20% of all that, of all the cobalt that's being mined in the DRC is hand mined. And, you know, we're looking into hand mined only because that's where the children come into effect. And we end up getting $580.8 million, which are going directly from hand mine. We found out that roughly 100,000 workers are, you know, hand miners in the DRC. And we also know that UNICEF found out that 40,000 of those workers are children. So we do the quick math, and 40% times 580 million roughly gets to $232,320,000, which are brought into the economy because of these child laborers.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
So you're saying that the cobalt mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo is estimated to be worth almost $500 million.
The nominal 2018 wages.
And this is all hand mined. There's no
Hand mined. They use pans. You know, some of them. I have some really interesting. There's this. Here, let me try to pull it up.
While he's pulling this up as well, I just want to have. I'm looking off of the same Wired article that I was talking about before, and it's saying pretty much how Amnesty and AfriWatch. They did some interviews with the Congolese adults and children, and I'm just going to read off of this, pretty much saying that it revealed that the typical conditions require miners to work without face masks, first of all, which is extremely unhealthy, or gloves for shifts of 12 hours or more.
12 hours, yes.
Yeah, and the wages in the mines are as low as 1,000 Congolese francs, which is about the equivalent to like 75 cents or less than $1 per day. And it's not enough to even cover the typical cost of education.
Yeah.
And many who work in these mines do not attend school. And some of them even said that they work up to 12 hours on weekends and holidays. And up to 80 miners have died mining cobalt between September 2014 and December 2015.
Yeah.
And finally, while they interviewed specific children as well, saying this one child named Paul, he's only 14. Saying that he would often spend 24 hours down in the tunnels, saying that he would arrive one morning and he would only be allowed to leave the following morning. And others have complained that there's a lot of beatings and like physical abuse and pressures into working by like these armed security guards as well.
I read a lot of articles about children who did suffer from these diseases, and I wanted to clarify what some of these things were going on. The dust he's talking about is dust containing the cobalt they're mining. So basically what they are mining is killing them.
Yeah.
In both the physical way of them being overworked and the internal way of them just like suffering from asthma.
Yeah.
Inhalation.
You thought the air was bad with the
Exactly,
fires.
exactly.
This is nothing. This is nothing.
And I just want to point out that all of these articles that we're looking at, they have pictures and videos to go along with it that, if you look at, are absolutely just, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't even imagine. And I'll overlay some pictures over the video right now. Really quick, I just wanted to highlight some points. The first one had to do with this concept we talked about at the very beginning of the semester, if you guys remember. We talked about how a lot of economics deals with this idea of scarcity, which is when the needs and wants exceeds the resources available. And the reason why I think this is relevant to what we're talking about right now is because cobalt is a natural resource. And because of that, we have a very small, limited supply of it. And we have such a high demand that in the future, we're going to use all of it. And Alec, I think you made this point already about how over time, we're going to have a smaller supply, we're going to have a smaller amount of this, and that has its own effects on the price of cobalt itself. But if we take a look at our ADAS graph, normally we wouldn't use that for single market things because it deals with the entire GDP. But I feel like the thing that I'm interested in is the long run aggregate supply, because that only shifts if there's a change in productivity or resources. And cobalt is a very important part to technology, especially in these American businesses. And American tech businesses are a very big contributor to the GDP of this nation. So it's kind of a scary thought to think that this issue with the cobalt and us running out might have an effect on GDP in the future. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up was something we learned just the other day about comparative advantage and absolute advantage. Pretty much saying that we have the absolute advantage because with the cobalt available, we can produce the most out of it. And for the businesses, with keeping opportunity cost in mind, it's not in their best interest to figure out where their cobalt is coming from. It's in their best interest to put their time and money into making their products as best as possible, you know?
Here, let me bring it up. In 2016, we had $60,000 for 1 metric ton of cobalt in 2016. Now in 2018, 1 metric ton of cobalt costs around $80,000. That's ridiculous.
That's absolutely
that's crazy.
Because as we know, as natural resources drop, the efficiency that the market can work at is going to start moving to the left and left and left, which is going to hike up prices, as we know, and just completely cripple the cobalt market.
Exactly.
Because as we learned on Friday, we were talking about how certain countries base their economy, such as Russia, they base their economy entirely on petroleum. But once the UAE started pumping out petroleum, their entire economy crashed.
Yeah.
So we're not only dealing with an issue with ethics and economics, but also global economics, as well as just our overall enjoyment. Because like we said, everybody we know uses one of these. Although we live in a very privileged area, I mean, a good majority of people have smartphones now. I mean, and it's only going to expand, as Alex said, 30-fold by 2030, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
It's only going to go up. So, I mean, overall, this issue is like, it's more than just economics and it's more than just ethics. It's global. It's going to impact everyone. And unless there is a giant cobalt meteor going to slam into the earth one day, we need to figure out a more sustainable way to deal with this.
Unless there's alternative sources of electricity storing, or rather energy storing and chemical storing to create electricity, which as of right now, there's nothing more efficient than cobalt and lithium-ion batteries. Then, unless we go nuclear, which is, I mean, that's not going to happen. So it's going to be tough.
But theoretically, if we were to find an alternative, it would affect the cobalt market by quite a bit. But more specifically, it would shift the demand curve for cobalt to the left. And that's because an alternative would be a substitute good rather than a complementary one. One of the biggest problems is that people never say that it's their fault. They always say that it's something else.
Yeah.
So, for example, like these companies that I'll read off a few of the quotations in a second, they're saying it's these other people. And then they go to those other people and there's it's somebody else. Yes. So people never blame themselves,
It's the middlemen of the middlemen. It's the distributor. I mean,
and we are definitely guilty for that because we're saying that we need these to survive and all that stuff, but we're still buying like a crap ton of like these technologies that use that. So let me just read some of these quotations, and pretty much it's saying the same exact thing that I'm saying right now. So for example, Samsung is this is a direct quotation. According to the Wired article, in reality, it is very hard to trace the source of the mineral due to the supplier's non-disclosure of information and the complexity of supply chains. Therefore, it is impossible for us to determine whether the cobalt supplied to Samsung comes from the DRC, Katanga's mines. And it added in a press statement that if a violation of child labor is found, contracts with suppliers who use child labor will be immediately terminated. Which I'm sure that they know that there's something going on, but like they
choose not to because it's more profitable.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's pretty much the exact same kind of responses from companies like Sony, Apple, Microsoft, HP.
Tesla too.
Oh yeah, as well. There's the quote from the Washington Post from someone in the industry saying that like we are challenged by the paradox of having so many resource riches, but the population is very poor.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a really good quote to highlight the issue that's going on. It's crazy.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being on my podcast.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Well, for all of you at home, we encourage you to call your local cell phone, I guess, producers.
Give them a hard time.
Yeah, give them a hard time. But also ask them, and this helps. Ask them, where does the cobalt in my phone come from? Because the more pressure you put on these large corporations, the more
really
change will happen.
The consumers. Yeah.
Exactly.
You guys have the power.
Yeah. And then on that note, I think we wrap it up now.
Tune in next time where we're talking about
how to get extra credit in Mr. Madero's class.
All right.
Dude, that's a moral issue within itself.
Well, that's a wrap.